Conversation with Ron MacLean.
Welcome to In Conversation. After a very emotionally charged 72 hours across North America, we have a very special show. Dr. Courtney Szto is at Queen's University. She is in kinesiology and health studies at Queen's and has studied extensively in her work the idea of race and citizenship, and specifically hockey in her doctoral thesis. But really her entire studies and research is activist in the sense that she examines physical culture and intersectional justice. So it's a privilege to have the opportunity to have Courtney join us on the show. And she's teaming with Donovan Bailey, Olympic and world champion. I had the chance to be at both Gothenburg, Sweden in '95 and Atlanta in 1996. I remember just before Donovan won the world championship, '95 in Gothenburg, he and I sat in the grass in the infield at the stadium there and did an interview. And we chatted for about 10 minutes. I started by saying, thank you. I know you've got a huge Reebok press conference coming up in 90 minutes. Appreciate the time, Donovan. Did the 10-minute interview. They shut the camera off and he said, Ron, it's no big deal, but you can see by this 2-foot logo on my chest that I'm with Adidas. And you mentioned the Reebok presser, but it's no big deal, just so you know. But it was a really nice moment of kindness that he protected me when the red light was actually on the camera. And he's a straight shooter. I'm sure you know that of Donovan Bailey, so you know he has a big heart too. He is the Olympic champion. When he did it in Atlanta, it's as big as it gets. It was the 100th anniversary of the Olympics. I remember it's Coca-Cola's home base, so the brands were huge there. The television in America was enormous, and he won. And he won the following week a relay gold medal. And his relay coach, Mike Murray, used to always say to the high-strung, fiercely competitive sprinters on his team, the power in each of us comes from all of us. The power in each of us comes from all of us.
Donovan Bailey, the world number one.
Ronnie Cern being challenged on the inside. Now Donovan Bailey moving up. Donovan Bailey moving up in the middle. He's the gold medalist and world champion in a time of 9.97.
Success is what's expected. In order for me to go from Jamaica to Oakville to become the fastest man in history, I must have had some level of expectations. And I have that in every way.
And from Vancouver, Dr. Szto joins us. I mentioned, Courtney, that you're at Queen's, of course, in kinesiology and health studies. And right around the corner here in Oakville is the Olympic and world champion. Donovan, thanks. And Courtney, thanks. And both of you, I'll just open the floor. Courtney, you first. What a week. So what are you feeling? What are you reflecting on?
Yeah, I mean, 2020 has definitely given us a lot to handle, testing our faith in humanity right now. But I guess the silver lining of all of this is that it has laid bare the flaws in all of the systems that we have created, all of our medical institution, education, policing. So this is actually a very important moment to be in. We have choices coming out of this situation that will impact us moving forward. And we have a lot of power in this moment, even though it may seem like we are quite helpless.
Donovan?
Wow. Ron, I mean, obviously I'm coming on talking to you today and yeah, I thought that it's extremely important for me to address what's the atrocities that are happening in the world right now. I think that we're in a place where, I think the lines are solidly drawn. It's either you are racist or you're not. And I think that, watching a man getting his life snuffed from him right in front of all our faces, by another man who seemed to be quite calm. It almost seemed like it's routine for him. There's really no place for that to be right now. And I think that, the lines are really, for me, drawn. And if you, it depends on what side you're on. It's either you're good or you're bad. And you're for racism, or you're anti-racism. And I think that, all of this has to be addressed. It has to be front of mind. I mean, I'm trying, these are conversations I have with my friends every single day from around the world. So these are conversations I have every day. I'm talking about not today, but every day of my life. I mean, conversations I have with my parents. And I think that, hopefully we're at a place right now where there's enough people, there's enough eyes, and so that this is addressed, and we can make some changes on the other side of this.
It feels like, Dr. Szto, that's exactly what you were kind of hinting at, the opportunity, the clarity out of this horrible tragedy. I would love your advice, because you always teach media to understand to use words like racism versus racial speculation or racist. You like that versus racially motivated. Explain that to me.
Well, it's actually came out in the AP's recommendations, I think the latest iteration as well, to say the word racism, because when we dance around the issue, we cannot actually solve the problem. It's like I tell my students, if we were going to go on a 5K run for the thing that killed grandma or grandpa, it doesn't have a name to it. What we call is a 5K run for cancer and things like that. So we're willing to name the causes of issues elsewhere, but when it comes to issues of particularly gender and race, we dance around the issue, and that's why we continue to have these very long, drawn-out conversations. So, as Donovan said, we are at an important point where we can reach a critical mass, and it's been too much work placed on the shoulders of Black, Indigenous, and other people of color, and it doesn't change that way. There's not enough momentum with only a few people doing the work.
So Donovan, go on about that. I mean, Colin Kaepernick's obviously a great example. Black Lives Matter is a great example. Movements used to be small and minority. They are growing, and we're seeing it all across North America today. What's kind of your idea of what we could do to move from sort of the incoherent protests big, and it's good, but it's a bit incoherent and all over the place, to get to a rebellion, to get to a revolution, to get to change? You have an idea?
Well, I mean, listen, I can only throw my 2 cents in, Ron. I mean, ultimately, what we have to look at is Colin Kaepernick, went on one knee in protest peacefully at a sporting event, and that was controlled, and he was making a point. I got it. I'm certain you got it. Courtney got it. But it seemed that the narrative got changed, and it became a political thing. Now we have people robbing and looting and doing those things. And I don't support those things. But you really got to understand that, if somebody is killed right in front of you, you've changed the narrative, and you've changed the laws, and you've changed the rules. So ultimately what we have to do is think about, what can happen now. For me personally, my future thoughts of politics. I mean, first of all, it's something I never thought I'd work in media. I like it. I work with you guys. My future thoughts in politics, it's something I have to reconsider. I do have access. I can pick up the phone and I can call our prime minister, and I certainly can call the prime ministers of many other countries. Sports have allowed me to do that. I always feel that, every vote matters. So we got to tell people to get out there and see what the political agendas of their political candidates, what they are, and if these things are in line with you and how you think, and we gotta continue to spread that, because ultimately for me, especially when it comes to laws and legislatures, you have to be at the table making those decisions, and I think that from where I'm sitting, if I can be at the table and I can help my fellow man and the next good people, I'm good with that. So again, I have to think about what my future is going to be in line with what it is that the future holds for the situation we're in right now. So
Donovan, you're saying you would consider running federally then?
Well, yeah, that's the only way I would. I mean, yeah, I mean, I would certainly. I'm just saying to you, Ron, there's certainly been talk of that. I mean, I have had conversations over the years, and certainly the parties and I have had discussion. I mean, the one I'm mostly affiliated with, I mean, I certainly had chats about it. But yeah, I mean, this is something you have to think about. In light of all of this, I have kids, and I mean, my parents. One of the things that you do, especially in my culture, is that you always ensure that you create a greater and better place and opportunity for your children. So again, if this is what I can do, then that's what I'm going to do.
That's fantastic. So Dr. Szto, this is a paper that you were part of piecing together on March 30th of 2019. Maybe explain to the viewer what that is. And it actually deals a lot with what Donovan's addressing here, and that's the idea that we have to have policy. We have to make a change both financially and conceptually. So that's going to require government, as if Donovan goes in that direction. Just tell me about the paper and the aims that you've had, the advocacy that you've had.
Sure. So about a year ago at Queen's, we held a one-day roundtable, which was the inspiration of Bob Dawson, to say a roundtable on racism in hockey. And he was very clear, let's say the word racism, because we very rarely see the word racism and hockey actually put together in the same sentence. We didn't want it to be about diversity and inclusion, because if you have issues of diversity and inclusion, it's because you have issues of racism. So we wanted to get to the root cause. We wanted it to be based around practical implementation for officials, parents, coaches, and associations. And the policy paper came out of it because our keynote speaker, Eugene Cand, who was a residential school survivor, he was on the TRC survivor committee, he said, I'm not willing to share my story of trauma if this discussion only stays in the room. There needs to be actual change that comes out of it. So he said, you need to do one better. So we came up with the policy paper, and it revolves around 3 pillars that we believe are necessary to create equitable change, and that's power, privilege, and access. We were supposed to meet with the Minister of Heritage's office to discuss moving forward with implementation, and then the pandemic struck. So we'll see how that unfolds. The NHL has also shown interest in the policy paper. Where we haven't seen a lot of movement, unfortunately, is with Hockey Canada. And they are a pivotal piece to actually making things different in the future. I have parents and coaches and associations reaching out to me for guidance, and that's great that they're finding the work. But at the same time, if you're coming to look for me, it means that there's nobody in the system for you to go to, that there is no kind of oversight and no outlet for them. So I can do what I can try on the outside, but this really needs to be an internal adjustment.
One thing that I'm sure you would agree, Donovan, is the lens through which people see things is often polarizing because of their politics. So for you going forward to make that change, to help institute that, are you conservative, liberal? You see, right now they're asking how's Trump dealing with COVID, never mind the social disaster. And 72% of the Republicans say he's doing a great job, and 73% of the Democrats say he's doing a horrible job. And that's where we sit in our own, perception or lens or blind spot. How do you feel about that, and how you choose to go conservative or liberal going forward?
Well, I think that, where I sit right now, there's certainly fiscal policies on one party that I like, and then there's social policies another that I like. We can.
That's easy. Yeah.
Yes. I guess if I'm sitting, if I'm making decisions today, I'd probably be independent. But certainly, it's very easy to sway one way or the other. But in light of what's taking place in the world right now, certainly I have to look at any policies that's going to make life easier, any policy that's going to make a sense of equality for every single person that's out there. Any sense that's going to provide opportunities for everybody. Like in any place where there's not layers, of systematic racism. So things have to be very clear for me in order for me to go forward and for me to actually put my name on the ballot.
It's frustrating to me, Donovan, that it is politicized. And Dr. Szto, that I'd throw that right to you. How do you, as an academic, because experts, right, elites, there's all these, or politicians, there's all these designations of those who control the citizenry. The citizen feels a bit powerless.
Yeah, I think what's happened, and this is borrowing from Dr. Brenda Elsey from the Burn It All Down podcast, is that we have confused moral issues with political issues. Racial justice should not be a political issue. It is a moral issue. Same with gender equality and marriage equality and things like that. So they have fallen on party lines, but they're also macro issues that have been dealt with the United Nations Direct Declaration of Human Rights. So we do kind of need to, unfortunately, blur the lines in order for anything to move forward.
It's great. Donovan, here's Athletics Magazine from 97 with you on the Air Canada jet, the Spirit of Donovan Bailey. You had the street named for you in Oakville. Doesn't have the Order of Canada. Donovan Bennett and you were quite funny in an interview, I don't know, a year or so ago when he was teasing you about not having the Order of Canada, which is
Right.
highly, highly suspicious. There you are. So obviously in 96, in addition to the glory of what you accomplished as, becoming the fastest man on the planet, you were in the middle of a Sports Illustrated row, Michael Farber's article. You were accused of creating controversy, imagine, because of racism and because of a misquote. So explain, what it was like to go through that. And I'd just love to hear you on that.
Well, I think, Ron, as you know, I think that, I'm very comfortable in my space. I'm very comfortable, part of being an athlete and also part of having an immense support system from my parents is that I am myself. And I've been very comfortable, especially in vocalizing anything I feel. Mm-hmm. And yeah, in 1996, I addressed racism. In 1996, I addressed racism in America because I was training there and I lived there and I enjoyed and was very successful there. But I also addressed racism in Canada. And one of the things that was discussed then, and I don't know how far we have gotten, is that there's absolutely blatant racism in America. We get that, okay? Mm-hmm. One of the things that I was addressing in Canada was that, racism with a smile, or racism because you're in the room in the back of the room doesn't make it less hurtful for the people that are experiencing it. And ultimately, obviously, we didn't elaborate on it then, so because maybe I was an athlete, I was outspoken. Obviously, when you look at, when you think of systematic racism, maybe it wasn't what I was saying, maybe it was the fact that I was actually saying it. Right. So I think maybe again, Ron, you and I, we can talk about anything at any time. Maybe back then, I rubbed some people the wrong way. Maybe that's why I don't have some accolades that I'm deserved. But ultimately, for me, how far have we gotten from 1996 when I was on my way to Atlanta and I was asked a question about racism and I gave a general answer about two different cultures and say basically it's the exact same thing, because there are marches throughout the world. There definitely, the epicenter is America, but guess what? We have marches in Toronto too, because there are people hurting every single place. At the end of the day, I don't want this to be, when you address racism, okay, the two major diseases that are happening right now, Ron, when you address racism and the pandemic, there are hundreds of millions of dollars going to be thrown at the pandemic because it's killing people today. And it's killing everybody today. So obviously as a glass is half full kind of guy, there's going to be a vaccine, and this is going to be healed, and we're going to be back to normal, and you and I be sitting in studio having a conversation and laughing. Racism is murdering people every single day, and that's for 500 years. So I just hope that the George Floyd death is not like this symbol right now. It's not the symbol, and this becomes a rotating cycle where we're up in arms, and then we somehow it goes away, and then we get up in arms again at the next death or someone's killed. So I'm saying to you, I hope that in all of this we learn something, and we certainly can get to a place where changes are happening this time. By the way, it's driven. One of the things I love, speaking to another friend of mine this morning, we're talking about our daughters. One of the things I love is that young people are involved, and there's a lot of young people involved, and they just don't care. They see equality in everybody, and if these are the people that are going to lead us into a place where everyone's equal, I'm right behind them.
Dr. Szto?
Yeah, I think that's a good point about do we go through these motions again in another few years? So we were here with Colin Kaepernick a couple of years ago, and we had a couple of white athletes step up, Megan Rapinoe being probably the most notable. And we're seeing more white athletes step up now, but again, they are predominantly American. Blake Wheeler, Austin Matthews, JT Brown. We have, of course, Evander Kane, and Sarah Nurse. Has been really nice to see her really step into her voice this past week. Melody Daou finally tweeted the word, or Instagrammed the words Black Lives Matter, and we're seeing more PWHPA players do that this morning. That matters because Canadian athletes really haven't made much of an impression with respect to athlete activism. We are in the record books, but we are not in the history books in the same way that we think that we should be as Canadians with respect to social justice issues. So I'm hoping that we see a lot more white Canadian athletes say the words Black Lives Matter. At this point, that is the starting point. And from there on, we can hold athletes accountable for their allyship. But right now, what we need to hear are the words to know who's actually in this fight.
Just to go back a quarter century ago to Atlanta, Courtney, Donovan, this was the story was conveyed this way. I mentioned that he's creating a controversy, was kind of, he should know his place. He shouldn't be doing that. But here's what was said as well: resurrecting the racism row. That's how it was kind of framed, the story, when it ran in one of the major Canadian publications. So Donovan, your comfort with your voice, that was really lovely, the way Dr. Szto explained for Sarah. You know, it's a great opportunity for a really brilliant hockey player and leading citizen in our country. You're that. But the interesting thing is, you said, you know, I lived much of my youth in Jamaica. I have an identity. I have George and Daisy. I have the prime minister, the police officer, the doctor look like me. So I felt, you know, strong. That's not everyone's story. Maybe talk about that. And then Dr. Szto, you can morph into your doctoral on South Asian hockey. But first you, Donovan, on that.
Well, I think that sometimes, I mean, there are people that try to frame the narrative that maybe being Black or being Jamaican is a negative thing. And I think I think that you could not be farther from the truth. Ultimately, when you grow up the way that I did, in a village supported by your mother and your father, brothers, friends, I'm born in a place where, the people around me, the most successful people around me, look like me, or some shades of me. I mean, even my family is very multiracial, actually. There was no issue for me to speak up, and there's no issue for me, to bring any. I mean, I was also, there's no issue for me to bring anything to the forefront. And also, one of the things I did as a child, I mean, we were seen and not heard. So I got to participate in family discussions by just being there and listening and understanding the wisdom. Now, my family moving to Canada, we're very much the same way. I mean, my parents started the Canadian Caribbean Association of Halton, in Oakville, and so, from then, these were community leaders, fundraising, community support for everybody. So I kind of understood what my voice meant from then. So when I got to sports, which is how I'm known around the world, it really was not an issue for me. And that's why it is what I said to you earlier, Ron. I mean, the lines are drawn for me. And this is just, I participate in a global sport, so, I the very best people from around the world, I know them. But also as a Canadian, I want to ensure, just like the good doctor says, I want to ensure that everyone with a voice talks about it, because the lines have to be drawn. It's either you are or you're not. I mean, and ultimately, there's no chance that you can actually look at a situation where a man's life's getting snuffed out, and you can't decide what is wrong and what is right and speak about it.
Dr. Szto, over to you. And as I said, you can carry on with what Donovan's pointing out there, or then take it into your study of South Asian hockey. And when we say Canadian hockey's our game, who are we? Who are we as Canadians? That's what I'd like to hear from you.
Yeah, I think the reality is that for racialized minorities in Canada, a dominant experience is that they're the only ones going through the system. So they're the only ones in their locker room, perhaps the only one in their association. So it is very different contextually from the NBA, the NFL, the WNBA, where if something happens, players can have a similar social network, that you can go in a locker room and see somebody that looks like you and probably has gone through something similar, which is why in hockey culture, it's that much more important that the system itself is there to support the players, because we don't have that kind of level of diversity yet. So to talk about hockey in Canada, when you put multiculturalism and hockey together, they start to unravel, unfortunately, the more you look at the lens. And that's why we don't do it. That's why we don't pull at those threads, unfortunately. But until we do, nothing is going to change. So I think we're at a really pivotal moment here.
Donovan, the anniversary of 1997, you and Michael Johnson. All through your career, you said something interesting. You said, my job was to not panic. You would always maintain speed if you could just stay calm. How do you think we're going to do that as individuals right now? Dealing, like, I think, this murderer, it's right there. The anger, the rage, it's within us all. How do we see the other? How do we stay calm? Or is there a point in staying calm, do you think?
Well, I mean, there are two points, Ron. One, even coming on, I mean, even I'm saying I'm going to speak to Ron, and it's almost like I was preparing for a race. I'm like, okay, I need to breathe and I need to relax, because I need to ensure that my message comes across clearly, and that my inside voice don't come out. I don't call someone a chicken, right? Right. Which I did, which was apparently a very horrific thing to do.
Well, let me just interrupt you on that. That's the 97 race, 150 meters, Michael Johnson, big event. Some felt that Johnson was the fastest man on earth, which didn't make any sense to most of the world. Anyway, you won it. The pressure cooker that you were in, you lashed out at Johnson for pulling up with a hamstring injury, and you called him a chicken. You were under such pressure. That's how it manifested itself. I think that's understandable, right? Well, that's where we're at, right? That's where we're kind of rage.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And I think that maybe I'm older and more wiser now, and I have to step back and see what it is that can be done, and also see what it is that my strengths are, my personal strengths, right? So certainly I can get up and speak to you about it, but I can also get into action by actually, inviting my friends, anyone, in the sports fraternity to speak up and have an opinion about it, but also going further, like I said earlier about the political side of things, where I believe, my way of protesting is to ensure that there's someone at the table, someone making the decision, someone knows that the next kids, whomever they are, they have an equal shot at whatever success they want to be. So that's really, for me, I just have to step back and see what it is I'm doing and how I'm going to go about it. I mean, as you know, I always like to surround myself with whom I think are the best people or the best advisors. These are the same things I say to anybody that feels disenfranchised right now. I mean, definitely get some great advice. See where it is that you can, where your strengths are, where you can contribute positively, and let's get to it and get it done. I do not want this to be another cycle. I do not want the killing of George Floyd to represent this week's version or this month's version. I do not want to see it.
I hope you won't think this is faint praise, but Paul Hunter on CBC News last night, I watched him and I saw a man shattered in Washington reporting. He was a seasoned veteran and he did a great job, a professional job, but I could see in his heart, I've covered this story once too often. Courtney, you and I were chatting yesterday about Martin Luther King Jr. had that great ability. Donovan connected into a number of different realms, and that's, I think, a great asset going forward, Donovan, for your pursuit. You talked to me about, as a professor, as an educator, code switching. Is that how you called it?
Mm-hmm.
Learning to identify, how to reach the other.
Yeah, so it's something. So code switching is something that racialized people, women, people from the queer community grow up learning how to do, is to how to speak to different audiences in different environments based on how safe you feel in those environments. So whether it's a woman walking into a boardroom with only men, or if you're trying to pass as straight in a very heteronormative environment, these are all things that you kind of learn how to do. But if what white privilege provides is that you don't actually have to do that practice. So you're not used to kind of choosing different words and language to elicit different responses from different people. So that is certainly one skill that we should be teaching athletes with respect to their allyship. And I think athletes are ideally situated. We always talk about sport as the school of life. Well, they have all the skills, but we haven't taught them how to transfer it into something like racial justice. So if you can accept a coach or teammate pointing out your mistakes and errors, then you can accept somebody on social media telling you how you could be a more helpful ally. It's really the same thing. It's you pick yourself up and you dust yourself off and you try it again. You try with different words, you try in a different manner until you find something that actually works and is helpful. White people are the solution to racism. Some folks are definitely part of the problem, but on the whole, white people are the solution to racism. This doesn't change without white allyship. So this is not the time to stay silent and be afraid of offending people or saying the wrong thing. You can think of allyship as kind of blocking shots, right? We love players who block shots because it saves labor down the line. It spreads the labor out so that the whole team is shouldering the work, and then it's not just following on a few people. So whether it's financial support or lending platforms like this, carving out room and budgets, there are many different ways to be an ally. And so any way that you can find that will reduce the labor on Black, Indigenous, and other people of color is really what we are hoping for right now.
Dr. Courtney Szto, Donovan Bailey, thank you, you two.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ron.
Again, my gratitude to Donovan and to Dr. Szto. We're back on Wednesday, 7 o'clock Eastern, 4 Pacific, with the GMs of the Calgary Flames and the Toronto Maple Leafs. It's Brad Treliving and Kyle Dubas. Our closing song lyric today is, "That time cannot decay. I'm junk, but I'm still holding up this little wild bouquet. Democracy is coming to the USA." The great Leonard Cohen. Thank you for watching today. For all of us, so long.